Ladies and gentlemen, fellas, hey, yo, fellas, welcome back, and we're going to talk about the final thoughts for week 11 right now. So I hope you're having a lovely day, lovely time, lovely start to your week, lovely start to your weekend. Right now, you're chilling out, you're relaxing, you're maxing out cool, you're letting your shoulders lean a little bit because you deserve it. Relax, take your shoes off, sit back, and here we go. This is what we're going to do. We're going to go position by position based on the game-by-game notes that I have taken, based on the projections, the ownership as of this recording right now, the news that we have, and we're going to come out here. We're going to smack you around a little bit with some information, right? And we're going to get you ready for week 11 of the NFL season from a props, from a DFS, from a fantasy standpoint. So as we always do, let's start it off with the quarterback position. And hey, first, the subscribe button pops up. Right now, about 40% of people who've watched this channel over the last 30 days not subscribed. 2 seconds of your time to get that situated. Double check on your end. So quarterback position, we slide into it. And if you watched my Thursday morning video, it's the top stacks video. And it's going to be similar to what you see there, so we don't have to go in depth as much as we did on that video. But my quarterback exposures and interests come specifically from stacking. If you're playing in cash games where you don't have to stack, well, that's something different. But there are a lot of quarterbacks in play this week. Now, there's tiers, though. There are 3 quarterbacks that stand out in their own tier, if you will, and that are the guys on here as a yes: Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Dak Prescott. And there's a couple of reasons why. Well, first of all these team totals look great. 28 for the Bills and Josh Allen, 29 for Mahomes, 27 for Dak Prescott, which is the clear game environment with a 56-point team total, maybe one of the best and highest game environments coming into a game that we've seen this season. So that's the obvious ways. And the interesting thing is there's ways to get different within those stacks, which seems hard to believe, but there's a lot of other players after that just look fine. Like nice matchups, nice team totals, right? Tennessee against Houston, 28 implied team total. Aaron Rodgers stacked up with Adams if you wanted to, with a 26 implied team total. You keep going down on Russell Wilson coming off of the worst game of maybe his career. All the critics against him, but he's cheap and his pass catchers are cheap. And oh yeah, they're underdogs with a 24-point team total. It can get really interesting here. Cam Newton is dirt cheap against Washington. Jimmy Garoppolo is also dirt cheap and he has a 26.5 implied total. So there's a lot of quarterbacks that I don't normally want to stack that are going to become actually options for me this week. But we start up top with the secure guys, and these secure guys are going to be pricey. Josh Allen at $8,100, I do think gets a little bit overlooked here. I think that you're going to see more ownership come in definitely on Patrick Mahomes, and as the week goes on, more ownership likely comes in on Dak Prescott. The leg up that Josh Allen has on a Dak Prescott is that his passing options are just way easier to pin down. Now, Cole Beasley's rib injury, only running 9 routes last week, hurt a lot of people, including myself, but you know Steph Diggs is there. You know that Sanders and Beasley and Dawson Knox, depending on the status of Knox and Beasley, those guys are going to be there. When it comes to Dak Prescott, is it going to be the Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott game? Because it easily could be. Who is it going to be now with Michael Gallup back with these 3 receivers? They're priced at standpoints where Amari's struggling. CeeDee Lamb is now really expensive. You don't know what to expect from Gallup and Schultz now. So there's not like that one guy you feel secure about, like where you look at Josh Allen. It's clearly Stephon Diggs for me. When you look at Mahomes, it's clearly Tyreek Hill. I feel more secure about that and confident. When you look at Dak, you would like it to be CeeDee Lamb, but the price point's expensive. And the consistency in Lamb has been there more so than Amari, but not to the extent of Tyreek Hill, right? When you're looking at Mahomes on the opposite side of that game. So I do think that's where you might get some ownership discount naturally built in for Dak Prescott, because most people won't want to take that risk up to a CeeDee Lamb or some of these inconsistent Cowboy pass catchers, especially because what we've seen the last month is a bye week. Them looked terrible against Denver. Nobody did good. And then last week it was Zeke getting 2 short touchdowns, Lamb having a couple of touchdowns, but everybody else not really getting you there. So there's a bad taste in your mouth if you've been playing Amari, don't know what to expect from Gallup. If you played Schultz like me last week, a decent amount, bad taste in your mouth. I think that gives us some built-in edge on Dak Prescott stacks. And the nice thing is they're a 2-point underdog. And when you're a 2-point underdog with a nice team total, historically speaking, with good quarterbacks, that works out for you in major ways. Now, all 3 of these quarterbacks up here are averaging over 290 passing yards per game. You look at Josh Allen this season, averaging 36 rushing yards per game. Mahomes quietly with 23 rushing yards per game. I mean, the rushing yard prop on Mahomes continues to be really nice, especially unlike the Raiders last week. But when teams start to play 2 high safeties against Patrick Mahomes, it's going to start to look really good, because 2 high safeties, it means that it's limited to what can go downfield. It means that if the play extends a little bit, if the offensive line that is solid gives him some time, he takes off, he gets 7 yards. He takes off, he gets 9 yards. He gets 4 yards, right? Because it's better than a throwaway. It's better than just a sack, of course. So that's what happens with Patrick Mahomes, and he continues to smash his over rushing yards props. So if you're seeing an over rushing yards props in the teens, not in the 20s somewhere on a sports book, I would actually go ahead and take that, especially when you factor in the amount of drives we're probably going to get in this game with these teams playing very fast paced. The Chiefs are throwing the most in the NFL, number 1 in passing plays per game. So right now, if I had to rank it, it's kind of tough. I would probably rank it as the 1A, 1B, 1C being the Chiefs, Dallas, and Buffalo in that order. Ownership will dictate that a little bit, but these guys look really good. Josh Allen with Diggs is secure. Mahomes with Tyreek and single stacks is probably what I like more. Important to call out that McCole Hardman dropped to 4th in the routes run pecking order behind Byron Pringle. Pringle is cheap. Pringle won't have insane ownership, single-digit ownership for sure. So that's a cheap way to get exposure to that stack. The big thing we have to discuss this week is what we're going to be doing with the Chiefs running back Darrell Williams. Now, if Clyde Edwards-Helaire returns, and they're saying that they might just keep him out till week 13, which is a couple weeks from now. I think maybe they go on their bye after this week, if that's the case, as to why they said week 13. But the big thing we have to keep in mind is if that's true, and you don't get Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week, and it's Darrell Williams back there coming off of a 9-catch, 100-plus yard day, got the DraftKings bonus for 100 yards and a touchdown, what do you do with Darrell Williams? Do you put him in your Kansas City groups? I think this is one of the biggest questions on the entire slate. Do you put Darrell Williams in your Kansas City Chiefs groups? Normally, I don't put running backs in a lot of groups. If you're a Christian McCaffrey, you're going to get a ton of targets. If you're maybe a Kamara, I put you in there. But this year, I'm not getting a lot of running back, wide receiver, or running back, quarterback options because Carolina and Sam Darnold haven't been a good stack. Jameis or Trevor Siemian and Kamara haven't been a good stack. So I just haven't been getting a lot of running backs in general in my stacks. I think the question we have to ask ourselves now is this the week that we do it, right? If you're not even looking at just last week, the weeks before that, 4 targets, 6 targets, 4 targets, 4 targets, 5 targets for a guy like Darrell Williams, which is nice, and he's still affordable. Now you're getting these similar target shares, 5 targets a game from guys like Aaron Jones, Ezekiel Elliott for some games this year. I don't have any interest in stacking them into those groups, but there's a different thing here. One, how often Kansas City actually throws in general, the fact that Kansas City running backs average with Patrick Mahomes over a touchdown per game. Now that could be on the ground too, of course, because they get in the red zone more, have these high team totals. And the other thing is that the fact that he's a little bit cheaper now, Darrell Williams is going to be lower owned. Is it worth it? I personally still lean to the fact that no, I don't think there's enough correlation here. I had a really good chat in the comment section with somebody they basically were saying, hey, if Darrell Williams, if you think that he's cheap and he's going to have a good game, why not put him in there with Patrick Mahomes? Yeah, the problem with that is if Patrick Mahomes has way higher correlation with a wide receiver or a tight end. Patrick Mahomes, the far majority of not only him, but quarterbacks in general, passing touchdowns, go to wide receivers and go to tight ends compared to running backs. You also add in that Patrick Mahomes has some mobility in his own right, and that takes away even more from the correlation that can happen between Darrell Williams. If Darrell Williams scores a rushing touchdown in this game, it does not help Patrick Mahomes' ceiling. It directly takes away from Patrick Mahomes' ceiling. You want Mahomes to score 40 plus. If Williams going for 2 touchdowns on the ground, Mahomes can't get to that high, right? You can't win a GPP. It's really hard for it to find the balancing act unless you get last week's performance where he's throwing a passing touchdown and obviously all the other yardage to Darrell Williams. Now, the reason why I will, in this specific situation, I believe I will include Darrell Williams in these Mahomes stacks, and you have to make sure you're not getting every single lineup because Williams is so cheap with a decent projection. The reason I will is this is a insane team total. The Chiefs are projected for over 4 touchdowns. The game environment should be really good, and he is cheap. That is the big one. He is cheap in a really good game environment. So Mahomes can go for 30 points. He can throw 40 passing yards to Darrell Williams if there's no Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Williams can get 15 fantasy points and really not take away from the ceiling. But if Williams was $7,000, 15 fantasy points isn't cutting it. That's why Zeke won't be in my DAX stacks, because if Zeke goes out there and has 18 fantasy points, it's good for him, but he's really expensive and it's not really contributing to the stack all that likely. Like last week, Zeke 2 rushing touchdowns took exactly away from Dak's mega ceiling that he could have had. So that's kind of breaking it down really deeply, and I think it's important to because I think these are the 3 most important stacks. I think that's the biggest question that I'm seeing right now in the week, outside of like leverage pieces. Do I go to this guy over this guy for ownership reasons? Those are always questions. This week specifically, Darrell Williams if there's no Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and even if Clyde Edwards-Helaire is in, do you trust Clyde Edwards-Helaire in those stacks over some other options like a Byron Pringle and things like that? Dak Prescott, those stacking options there. Other than that, though, yeah, the other quarterback options, they all kind of look the same to me. Like if you're going Rodgers, it's really just single stacking in unless you want to put MVS in that one against Minnesota. You scroll some more for Tennessee without Julio Jones and no real good tight ends. I mean, you can punt Jeffrey Swaim this week, but other than that, it's really just single stacking and expensive A.J. Brown against Houston. Run it back if you want to with Brandon Cooks. That's about it. Joe Burrow, I do think, is involved for double stack since he's not a mobile quarterback. So Joe Burrow with a T. Higgins and a Jamar Chase, yeah, feels good. CJ is home if you wanted to. Boyd, I'm less excited about. Running it back on Vegas with multiple options. Waller, probably my favorite option. Josh Jacobs, probably my second favorite option in that type of a build. The one game environment that I think is sneaky. So for Cam Newton to get the elephant out of the room, he projects for like over 20 points for me. He looks great. If you're playing in really small single entries, I'd go there. You can stack him up with DJ Moore. It looks solid. Just not something that I trust to actually hit a ceiling, a mega ceiling. The price point's nice. Same thing for Jimmy G. Jimmy G, if there's an Elijah Mitchell with a broken thumb, if they're down so many running backs, yeah, Jeff Wilson is there. But in this game environment with a 26.5 implied total, Jimmy G is playing well. The problem is how often does he really throw? Like if he throws 25, 30 times in this game, game, it's not great. Now, Trey Lance hasn't been being used in the red zone, increases the ceiling and upside of Jimmy G. The problem is at 5,600, how often is he throwing? Is he throwing 25 times in this game as a 6.5-point favorite? Because then even if Debo is getting a lot of yards after the catch and Kittle is back and mashing people after the catch, his 250-yard performance isn't really getting you there. So Jimmy G's on here just because I do think there's a decent chance that he's more so in play this week than any other week because of the fact that he's at this price point, this matchup, and this team total. But the one that's interesting is Russell Wilson. I mean, DK Metcalf is going to be low owned. Tyler Lockett is going to be relatively low owned. These guys are so damn cheap. Tyler Lockett $6K flat. Metcalf below $7K. Russell Wilson is now $6,500. Single stack it, double stack it. Clear options on the run backs as Arizona. It's trending with Kyler Murray returning to practice on Wednesday that he will be playing. I think that Russell Wilson is the sneakiest plus highest upside stack because everybody saw last week's game. They scored 0 points against the Packers. Russell Wilson's not completing deep passes. He throws a couple of interceptions in that game. And now everybody's jumping up and down saying Russell Wilson ain't that guy. It's been 1 week, fellas. It was 1 week after he came back from a pin removed against a really good secondary, which is not going to be anywhere near the case this week. Arizona fine defense, but nowhere near as good as what the Packers have been doing with those elite safeties back there. So that's kind of that sneaky play. And that's a lot. That's a mouthful that we just talked about for quarterbacks because I think this is a really important week. There's 3 standouts. We have to differentiate between them. And if you want to get different, that's what comes up after that. So there's your quarterbacks. We'll slide into the running backs momentarily. But first, the sponsor, and since we talked about quarterbacks, I have 2 quarterback props. The sponsors of the program today is going to be PrizePicks. You all know about PrizePicks. A lot of you do. A lot of you are just finding me, though. And if you're not part of that 40% that aren't subscribed, yo, hit the subscribe button. But PrizePicks, you just take the over-under on fantasy points, on player props. I have a bunch in play on Thursday Night Football as I record this Thursday afternoon. A bunch in play every single week, somewhere between, depending on the week, of $500 and $1,000 in props. It's a lot of fun. Props are a lot of fun. You just root for a single player. You take the over-under, and here you go. You'll get a free bet, free, F-R-E-E, your bet, you people at home, free bet up to $100. Take advantage of it while it lasts. It takes 2 seconds, prizepicks.com. You go on your phone, you go on your computer, your tablet, whatever device you might have. And you sign up and you use the code SAL, free bet up to $100. There's a lot of props. I'll be posting them on Twitter usually, in the Discord, on Patreon. But here's you go. I have Tyrod Taylor over 14 fantasy points. 14 fantasy points is disrespectful. Sure, he had a bad game in his first game back last time. Give the guy a break. He's coming off of injury. Now he's going to have a fine matchup in this one. And I have him for over 17 fantasy points. That's a really big difference from 14. We smashed the over. Joe Burrow over 255.5 passing yards. This number was set in the 270s over on Underdog when we did our top stacks video. 255.5. Yes, I easily take the over on that. I have Joe Burrow in the 280s this week. I like it a lot. I like the matchup against Vegas. I think it could be a sneaky shootout with a 50 implied total and a 26 implied team total. So yes, we take the overs on both of those. We combine them together, use the code SAL, and then you get the free Dollarooskies up to $100. So you can check it out. It's in the description, the link there. Anything that you do. So you can check it out. It's in the description down below. That code SAL gets you a free bet up to $100 Rooskies. Check it out down below as we now transition into the running back position. To the running backs we go, and up top, Christian McCaffrey. He's just going to be a yes. He's the most expensive player on the slate. I have him for 22.5 fantasy points, my highest projected running back right now. McCaffrey, if you're just looking at this matchup, it's a positive 15% run blocking advantage for him. It is a tough matchup against what is a borderline top 5 run defense of Washington, but it's Christian McCaffrey. 10 catches, 66 yards last week. There is some concern with Cam Newton. You know, he came in last week for the goal line touchdown. Can he vulture McCaffrey? Yes, because in 2019, when McCaffrey had his 15 rushing touchdown season, Cam Newton played 2 games. He was banged up. In 2018, the year before McCaffrey blew up, he had 7 rushing touchdowns that year with Cam Newton. So it's definitely possible. And that was in a not as crazy role as he's had in 2019 and in the previous 2 years when he's actually healthy. So there is definitely some concern there. The bigger issue is value. We don't really have insane value receivers. We'll get to that. Unless Jeffrey Wilson pops up as a value if Elijah Mitchell is ruled out, there's not insane like $4,000 running back values. There's a couple of 5K, a couple of low 6K guys, but enough value, especially in the stacks when you see how expensive Dak stacks, Mahomes stacks, and Josh Allen stacks are this week. It's really difficult to get to McCaffrey, but the man's just a walking 25 plus points. He didn't even have a bonus last week. He's had 41 fantasy points since returning the last 2 weeks without a bonus, without a touchdown. So that is all coming, and the 40-point smash week for McCaffrey is also coming, and when that happens, you probably have to have him to win. So yes, he's a yes for me. Dalvin Cook is more of a leverage play. I don't think the Vikings, as always, are going to be that highly owned. Now that he's more expensive, people, if they get up to that range, I think that they probably go, honestly, Jonathan Taylor. I think that they're normally just staying in the 7K range or 6K range, or if they're in that range, they're going all the way up to a Christian McCaffrey or pivoting to different position, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill. So I think that Dalvin Cook, who always has success against the Packers who are stopping the run and tackling well, DeAndre Campbell, Barnett, their linebackers, the best linebacker core they've had in a while there, Dalvin Cook is looking like a good leverage. Like, I don't think you get a lot of ownership here. 24-point team total or so. Slight underdogs. I think that he's good. A yes might be an overstatement, but I only have Dalvin Cook projecting out right now for about 10% ownership, and I think that number drops as the week goes on. James Robinson, he has a new injury in practice as of Wednesday. Track this news if he's out by the time you're watching this. Obviously, don't put him in play, but this man is never owned. He was like 8% on last week. What does he do? He gets his 5th straight start that he's played the full game of over 18 DraftKings points. Lovely, with a lot of those being over 20, with over 20 opportunities per game right now. During that stretch of 5 completed games, I only have James Robinson on my ownership projections on Patreon. You can check out my ownership and all that I offer. Optimizer, Discord, projections, ranks, all that. The ownership being massive leverage. If you don't have ownership projections, you're really with a huge leg down in these tournaments. But James Robinson, I only have him projecting out for 6% ownership. He is my number 4 running back play in the slate, point per dollar wise, with 6% ownership. Clearly a smash. Now, the best running back play on the slate is somebody that I don't care what the ownership is. It will not get high enough this week. I have A.J. Dillon right now projecting out for 20% ownership. That might seem like he's the chalk. Of course he is, but that's not high enough. A.J. Dillon, I will not be fading him until he starts to hit 35% ownership or so. And here's a spoiler alert for you, because there's a lot of other good running back plays around him. And just in general, this is a 12-game slate, not a 10 or 8-game slate. He is not going to hit 35% ownership. He might hit 24%. 20% I think is his high number, to be honest with you. I have A.J. Dillon right now for 18.2 fantasy points, and that's with me trying to be really conservative on that. This man is seeing 11.5 opportunities per game in games where he's the backup to Aaron Jones, who's seeing 17 opportunities per game. Now those 17 opportunities per game are gone. Kylan Hill, the 3rd string, is on IR. It's just A.J. Dillon, Patrick Taylor from Memphis, who barely has any use in the NFL. They're going to trust A.J. Dillon here. And look at the week that he gets to do it. He comes in as a 2.5-point favorite with a 26-point team total in a divisional matchup where he has a positive 34% run blocking advantage. One of the best matchups on the entire week against a bottom third of the league, Minnesota defense, run defense. Everything checks out for A.J. Dillon. He has 18 targets in 10 games as a backup running back. He is right now top 5 in so many in the limited snaps he's had. Top 5 in yards per route run against running backs. Top 5 in yards after the catch and all this stuff, right? He looks great. Yards per route run is a great metric as well. He looks really good. He looks a lot better as a receiver than he did in college, and he's 250 plus pounds, and he's a monster just athleticism wise. Everything looks good for A.J. Dillon. I'm going to be playing him. Let's just hope the guy stays healthy. You slide down to one of the major reasons why A.J. Dillon is probably not going to be highly owned, and that's because James Conner is also going to pick up ownership. Especially if Kyler Murray returns, you can expect James Conner, who's my number 3 play on the slate, picking up 15% projected ownership as of right now, to be owned. I mean, James Conner is going to go out there. He's going to project for 16 to 18 touches in this game as a favorite against Seattle, who has a very good run defense, a top 5 run defense. But like last week, A.J. Dillon faced that Seattle team. He had over 100 total yards because of his receiving work, and he found the end zone twice. So you can still get there even if they're good in between the tackles. Conner, he's just been the full workhorse. 76 and 77% of the snaps the last 2 weeks. You know, Benjamin is not threatening him, the second-year player. It's Conner's backfield. 14 opportunities in the worst game environment where you're getting blown out last week. Still saw over 75% of the snaps. Still was in the game late. James Conner, 12 touchdowns leading the league this year. He looks good. The problem is I prefer A.J. Dillon. Now you get to these value plays a little bit right here at the running back position. So this is what I want to talk to you about, just where the potential value may lie. And it starts with David Montgomery. And here's the big thing for David Montgomery. Most weeks, like if Aaron Jones was healthy this week, if Chase Edmonds was healthy this week, most weeks, a $5,500 David Montgomery, who, by the way, is 4th in the NFL, not 1, not 2, not 3. Shout out LeBron James. 4th in the NFL in opportunity share, meaning that this guy has used a ton in his offense, right? Absolutely a ton. He comes back in his first game on a Monday Night Football game where they said he's going to be limited and plays a season high 85% of the snaps, 15 touches, 80 yards against a good Pittsburgh Steelers team, and then he gets a bye week, an entire week to rest since then. This guy's going to come in fully ready to go. I'm sorry, Khalil Herbert, the rookie. I liked him in preseason. I liked him for the past couple of weeks, especially in my season-long league, but sorry, it's the David Montgomery show. Most weeks, David Montgomery would be the 20+% owned running back because he's so cheap. How is he 5,500? David Montgomery should realistically be 6,500 this week. He has a positive 30% run blocking advantage, right? Against a bottom half of the league Baltimore run defense that ranks, 27th out of 32 teams in tackling. And what is David Montgomery known for coming out of college? Breaking motherfucking tackles, right? So David Montgomery, normally going to be highly owned. This week, he's going to pick up ownership, no doubt about it. But I have Montgomery currently coming in with just 12% ownership. So he's not picking up a lot. Why is that? Everybody in that same price range is going to A.J. Dillon for a couple $100 more, is going to James Conner for a couple $100 more. And they're also going to the guy you see on the screen right now in the YouTube version, Myles Gaskin at 5,700, mainly because of his matchup and the usage that he's getting. Myles Gaskin these last 2 weeks has 34 carries, and his total yards with his receiving yards is just barely 100 yards at this point, 102 yards. His carries on the ground are not working out that great, but he did have a 6-reception game against Houston. Myles Gaskin, Salvon Ahmed is a lot more involved than people actually know. Like Myles Gaskin, 2 out of his last 3 weeks, he's failed to even top 8.5 fantasy points. So that's not good. But Myles Gaskin right now is picking up 15% ownership. There is no way in hell I'm going to Myles Gaskin. I get it that the matchup is really good. No way in hell that I'm going to a higher owned Myles Gaskin who is more expensive than David Montgomery, who is also in a really good matchup and is going to be utilized more in his offense, right? David Montgomery is going to have a higher opportunity share with his other running back Khalil Herbert than Myles Gaskin in the Salvin Ahmed split. So I know the matchup is really good, but ownership matters here. So Myles Gaskin for me is not a yes. He's going to grade out as a good value, like a top 5 value for me, but Montgomery is my number 2 value on the slate. So if this ownership holds, Montgomery is the play that I'm going to in the 5K range over Myles Gaskin. The only other guy who comes into consideration is a man we talked a lot about, and that is Darrell Williams. I think Darrell Williams is a great play. The team total is 10 points higher than the Bears and David Montgomery, so that's enough right there to just show touchdown upside a lot more. Right now I have Darrell Williams as my number 7 overall value. I have about 2 more fantasy points projected for David Montgomery, but it also looks like a solid play. So I prefer Darrell Williams and David Montgomery to Myles Gaskin this week, which does not seem like what the industry is doing. That's fine if you want to go and take advantage fully of the matchup against the Jets. I wouldn't be shocked to see Salvin Ahmed outproduce Myles Gaskin this week. My final yes is going to be DeAndre Swift. Jamal Williams, I'm currently projecting him to play, but Jamal Williams didn't even practice all of last week. We'll track the reports this week. If Jamal Williams is out, you have a new offensive coordinator, or the head coach is taking over for the offensive coordinator role now in Detroit, and that man wants to run even more than Anthony Lynn wanted to run. And you saw that last week for the first time with 33 carries in overtime for Swift, still saw 6 targets, and his price point doesn't change. Maybe it went up $200. I think it was $7K last week. So that flat price of $7K probably keeps his ownership a little bit lower. It is a tough matchup. It is a terrible team total here, but if you're going to get 25 opportunities out of Swift, who's athletic, who saw a lot of broken tackles, 7 broken tackles last week, just on the ground alone, not even counting the receiving game work, Swift starts to become like okay, he's priced around that range that is James Conner, and he's priced around that range that is A.J. Dillon, except he's more expensive. People are going to flock below him to that price point. If they're going to go to the 7K range, he's kind of in this no man's land where people are just going to go all the way up to McCaffrey. So I think Swift finds himself in a dead range that doesn't pick up much ownership. Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, Zeke, these guys are also in play. I think Nick Chubb is the sneakiest of all those guys if his ownership remains low. Right now it's coming in at around 14%, so at that point I don't really feel the need to get there. But Chubb, 10-point favorite, 27 implied team total against Detroit. No Kareem Hunt still. Obviously, everything there stands out as a smash spot. Just the price point makes it a little bit more difficult to start to fit him in at 7,800, and I would prefer Dalvin Cook at, right now, lower ownership. So that's the running back position. I feel like that was a, pat yourselves on the back, everybody. Crack your knuckles. Take a break here. Nice little breakdown of the running backs. I actually had this idea to make a clips channel, and I would have another channel, the Sal Vetri clips channel or something along those lines, and I would clip the quarterbacks talking discussions from this video. That's like 7 minutes. Clip the running backs, which is like 7 minutes, the wide receivers, and just have all different clips. If people just want to watch that clip, it's more digestible, more viewership, right? So it's interesting. I would have to start from 0 on a separate clips channel though, but it's interesting. I also don't have the time. So if there's any video editors out there watching this right now and don't care to just take videos down and just clip them and then send them back to me or post them on my behalf on that second YouTube channel, we can see there's an opportunity there for maybe discussing some stuff. But I don't want to give myself too much work these days. I feel really nice and balanced of where my head is at mentally, physically, but we'll see. It's an interesting idea, I think. So we slide now into the wide receiver position, and there you go. There's a little like button for you. Appreciate you all a ton. Come join the Patreon community if you're not already. All right. I mean, I don't know why you're not up in here. The community, not only to all the perks that you get at industry low prices, because like I said, I'm just a one-man band here, but you also get the Discord of 100,000 plus members where everybody's chilling out, relaxing, maxing all cool. I see I got 2 Discord messages right now we're going to answer. It's a lovely time. You talk about the games, you talk about plays, you talk about just in general strategy. It's a lovely time. It's a great community of like-minded people. I don't personally have any friends in the real world that play DFS. I don't. I had a couple acquaintances at college, but I don't keep in touch. So I don't have any friends that in the real world play DFS, right? So it's nice to have that Discord of people of like-minded betting, all that type of stuff. It's cool. So now we go to the wide receiver position where it's interesting. I think I only have right now, let's see, I have 27 players. I'm doing better. I have 27 players right now on here to discuss. Not all of them, of course, but it's interesting because normally this list is like 40 or 50, but we're trying to zone it down a little bit. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, these really good wide receivers. I'm not going to try and get in too much depth. I've talked a lot about Tyreek Hill this week, how insane he's been, 12 targets per game over his last 7. Adams' price point out of nowhere goes back up. He had a good game last week at 8 targets, but 7 catches, 78 yards with no touchdown. It's not paying off those price tags. I do think that Adams is still going to pick up ownership. Hill will definitely pick up ownership. The one man, though, on this list that comes up next that I think for somehow is going to make you have decent leverage in GPPs is CeeDee Lamb. Now, track this injury that he had. They were blowing them out. They took him out. I don't think it was a massive injury. It doesn't seem to be a massive injury on his forearm. I currently have CeeDee Lamb projecting out as it stands right now on my Patreon ownership projections, and this is why it's so damn important to see this stuff. I have CeeDee Lamb currently projecting out for just 6% ownership. And you might be saying, Sal, you're totally full of shit, 6%. Well, think about it. Dak Prescott's expensive if you're stacking him up. If you're trying to run back somebody on Kansas City, a lot of people are going to try Kelsey or Tyreek. They're expensive. If you're playing Mahomes and you're stacking him with a Kelsey or Tyreek, that's really expensive. Running it back with Lamb is difficult when you don't have insanely valuable running backs in terms of value running backs. You don't have the punt tight ends this week that we've been getting. So it is really hard to go to CeeDee Lamb. A lot of people in their Dallas stacks are going to choose Amari or they're going to choose Gallup, right? CeeDee Lamb at 6% projected ownership right now. And the funniest thing is he was the wide receiver 3 on the week last week, right? The man has 28.6 fantasy points and basically 3/4 of play. He only plays 45% of the snaps, CeeDee Lamb, runs 20 routes, which was a season low, and puts up 29 fantasy points. He's a monster. He's Dak's favorite target. Over his last 4 games, 7, 9, 8, and 11 targets, leading his team during that time by far. I get it. The price point is expensive at $7,600, but if this is going to be the highest game environment on the week for stacks, I think it is going to be. I think Mahomes is going to be 15% owned in a lot of contests. I think Dak Prescott is going to be 10 or 12% owned. So a quarter plus or a third, probably a quarter to a third of the lineups this week are going to feature these stacks in a lot of contests. But somehow the best receiver on Dallas, arguably the best receiver in the game right up there with Tyreek Hill for that specific game, not the game overall, shout out Devontae Adams and Justin Jefferson, is going to be low owned, right? It's crazy, but the price point is the reason why. CeeDee Lamb at $7,600 right now for me looks like one of the best leverage plays on the slate. He's probably a top 2 or 3 leverage play on the entire slate as it stands right now, and the best leverage play in this game. Another really good leverage play in the slate is Mr. DK Metcalf. I already told you about how Russell Wilson, I don't think Russell Wilson is just going to back-to-back have the 2 worst games of his career, right? A little bit of rust last week and just a really good matchup. Rust for rust. How about that? Put that on a shirt. But DK Metcalf is still getting the volume. 8 targets last week, right? And 6 targets and all the targets the week before don't really count because it was a different quarterback, but 8 targets last week. To start the season with Russ, he's had 11, 9, and 8 targets, right? I think he's completely fine. He's a monster. He now has a much better matchup against Arizona this week. Metcalf, I currently have coming in right now, just 8% ownership. These alpha receivers with single-digit ownership in good game environments with solid quarterbacks, take advantage of that. His teammate Tyler Lockett, the exact same thing can be said for him, except he's $800 cheaper. Right now, I have Tyler Lockett coming in with more ownership. I actually prefer Tyler Lockett because of that $800 cheaper price tag. You saw Russ taking those moonshots. Lockett led the league last week in air yards. That is going to connect in a major way. We've talked in our top values video that releases on Wednesdays each week about these next couple of players, Brandon Cooks, DJ Moore. DJ Moore is below 6K. A third of his targets this year have been not catchable. Why has that been the case? Because the absolute worst quarterback statistically by all the metrics that matter, yards per attempt, clean pocket efficiency, clean pocket accuracy, has been Sam Darnold. And PJ Walker coming in for his first 2 games and going 3 of 14 to start, and then this past game only having a 3 average depth of target of 3 because, Christian McCaffrey has 10 receptions, throwing literally to the line of scrimmage, is not helping DJ Moore or any of these wide receivers. Now that Cam Newton is there, and we're not trying to say that Cam Newton is the MVP Cam Newton. We're trying to say that we don't think, because it's hard to, be as bad as the worst quarterback in the league, Sam Darnold, and the combination of him and PJ Walker. If Cam Newton could be league average, which is the goal, which is the $4 million goal that they paid him and the $10 million if he goes to the Super Bowl and all these incentives. If Cam Newton could be league average, DJ Moore is $1,000 on their price in a really good matchup against a bottom 5 secondary still in Washington. Brandon Cooks is on here. I like him a lot. The only problem you get with Cooks is that Tennessee's secondary has been playing a really good zone, and, the team total's not great. Tyrod Taylor looked bad last week. That can all change. I would right now prefer, it's very, very close between these two guys if you watch the values video, between Brandon Cooks and DJ Moore at similar price tags. I have them both coming in for 12% ownership, so similar ownership. I have DJ Moore for 0.2 more fantasy points. He's $100 less, so I would lean to DJ Moore, but it's going to be the final ownership number that really dictates that. T. Higgins we've talked about a lot. T. Higgins and Waddle, like we just talked about with DJ Moore and Cooks, T. Higgins and Waddle for a little bit cheaper are just very similar plays for me. I have T. Higgins for 15.4 fantasy points. I have Waddle for 15.4. So they project out the exact same. Higgins is $200 cheaper, but Higgins is also picking up about 4% more ownership. So I would lean to Waddle for leverage there, but I like Higgins. Higgins looks fantastic. He's my number 1 value play this week. 13 plus points in 3 straight weeks. I put a tweet out about how unlucky he's getting. Tackled on the 1-yard line in their last game before the bye. 3 yards short of the 100-yard bonus before that. His air yards every single week right now, 135 air yards per week over his last 3 games, and now he gets a good matchup against Vegas. Waddle has a similarly good matchup, but he's not getting as much red zone activity. 5 targets in the last 3 games for Higgins. Higgins leads this team in targets and receptions ahead of Jamar Chase, so I'll lean to Higgins if the ownership is only like a 2 or 4 point difference versus Waddle, but both of them are strongly in play. Waddle for me this week ranks out right now, if you're talking about overall values, as my number 4 value wide receiver on the updates that I've been putting out. Corey Davis is also up there. Corey Davis is going to be one of those leverage plays this week. He's only coming in with 4% ownership. Corey Davis, when you compare him to guys like Waddle, guys guys like T. Higgins. He's projecting out, sure, for like a point and a half less, but he's also cheaper by a significant amount, $600 less than Waddle, $400 less than Higgins is somewhat significant, and he's going to be a third of the ownership. So Corey Davis comes in as potentially a that one dude play this week. Matchup against Miami is fine for him. He came back. He saw about a 20% target share last week and this entire year. You don't love the matchup with Joe Flacco. You don't like that at all, actually, but that's why he's going to be coming in lower owned. Michael Gallup is a fine option in those Dallas stacks. Michael Gallup is definitely going to pick up ownership since he's a cheap option there. People are going to realize that he's coming back as the week goes on. 8 to 10% ownership makes sense. I think that's fine. And then my final yes is a man who's been our that one dude or one of our that one dudes the past 2 weeks, and he continues to work out. Like almost 30 fantasy points last week, like 18 fantasy points the week before that. Now we get to match up against this difficult secondary of the Packers. They play 2 high safeties, and those safeties are absolutely just standouts, right? Darnell Savage and Adrian Amos are fantastic safeties. It's working in this Joe Barry system of the cover 2 man. They shut down Tyler Lockett. They shut down DK Metcalf last week, but Justin Jefferson is a different animal. I think that DK Metcalf is like a top 10 receiver. Lockett's fantastic. I think Justin Jefferson is number 2 behind Devontae Adams in the league, personally. If you want to say Tyreek's up there, if you want to say Diggs or whatever it might be, sure. And top 5, then top 3 for Justin Jefferson. But I'm going to put him as a yes here because I have him coming in right now at 4% ownership. The disrespect just continues here. Yes, the price point is up. Yes, people want to go to Tyreek and Adams, and probably justifiably so. But if I told you that Justin Jefferson is 4% owned this week and Devontae Adams is 18% owned this week in the exact same game, that is a fantastic leverage spot. It is enough at 4 to 5 times as much ownership for me to lean to Justin Jefferson. Adams projects out better. He projects out for like 5 points better, right? It is a better matchup. It is a better target share for Adams, and a better quarterback, of course. But Justin Jefferson here looks solid as a leverage play. He's a yes for me. The rest of my wide receiver interests are going to be guys that kind of fit into stacks. Landry's on here. People have been burned back-to-back weeks by Landry. Now gets the best matchup he possibly can, a 27 implied total. I don't even care if Baker's not in there and it's Case Keenum. Either way, Landry at 5,100 looks good. Landry's another guy like a Corey Davis who I don't think picks up as much ownership. 7% ownership I have right now because he's burned people these last couple of weeks. All the other stout receivers look good, right? Stephon Diggs in stacks. Deebo Samuel in stacks are as a one-off. He continues to get there. A.J. Brown, if you're going to single stack, it's probably like the only way I get there. Because if I'm looking for like one-off standout wide receivers, I'm going to go to Justin Jefferson over A.J. Brown. I might even lean to go to Deebo over A.J. Brown. But if you're stacking that with Tannehill, it looks good. Jamar Chase in your double stacks. Amari Cooper, of course, in stacks. Pittman's going to be a tough one to get to for me this week. Not a good team total. $6,100 is a price point where you're going to need like 20 points for it to work out for you, which is usually needing a touchdown. Tough matchup against Buffalo. I do think it keeps his ownership a little bit lower, but I don't think I get to Pittman that much. He'll be probably 5% on this week, which is interesting. Emmanuel Sanders has been struggling the last couple of weeks, but he has a really nice SuperDraft multiplier, by the way. I mean, SuperDraft, if you want to just kind of put together somewhat of a lineup here, they have a contest that has $135,000 to first. It's a multiplier format. It is just a fantastic spot to put your first dollars because the contests don't fill. They'll fill at like 20 to 20, or they'll fill at like 80%, so 20% won't fill, meaning you have to verse and beat 20% less of the field than on DraftKings and FanDuel just because people don't know about the site still. You get a free $25 if you just use the code SAL when you sign up. But I mean, Fields has a nice multiplier. This is kind of like a dummy lineup I was making, but an actual good one. Fields, I mean, Connor and Gaskin, we talked about, they have nice multipliers. But you start to get down here, and I didn't put them in this specific lineup, like Waddle, T. Higgins, and Cooks. Their multipliers are nice. But if you're trying to get different, like players that aren't going to be playing, or they might not know about Emmanuel Sanders and his high multiplier, only looks like a good play in stacks of Buffalo and DraftKings for the most part, but he has a nice multiplier. If Sanders does anything decent, his higher multiplier of a 1.65x, he's going to actually have a higher ceiling, that means then, and he gets there easier on SuperDraft. So it's interesting. This is kind of like a dummy lineup I was putting together. Cooks, Higgins, Waddle, all that type of stuff. But that's just a point to point out that for me, Sanders is just going to be a play in stacks of Buffalo, but on SuperDraft, he actually doesn't become a main priority, but becomes one of the better, I would say, lower-owned plays on SuperDraft this week. That's where we're at. Beasley is going to be involved in stacks if he's healthy. T.Y. Hilton can just be a one-off if you really need cheap one-offs. Other cheap one-offs that I don't really like. Byron Pringle, I do like. I think he'll be low-owned in those stacks. Looks to be the wide receiver 2 now on the Chiefs. Quez Watkins, especially if Jalen Reagor's banging up, although a tough matchup. These are just the only real punt options. I know some people want to play Marcus Johnson. I'm not there as much. I like Marcus Johnson. I liked him in the preseason. I'm just not there as much. Brian Edwards, if you want to just punt that in what could be a good game environment, the volume is just not there. Crowder's fine. Like there's just not a lot of good value. That's why I'm saying that it might be tough to get to McCaffrey this week. It might be tough or a little bit more difficult to get to those CD Lamb lineups and those Dallas and Chiefs stacks because it's not that cheap this week. And the other reason is that there's not any really value punt tight ends. Like you don't have the $3,000 range Dan Arnold every week getting you 10 points. You don't have that $2,500 Gerald Everett last week who saw some targets. He's now in the 3K range. A lot of tight ends you're going to see. I have a bunch of tight ends as yeses just because it really depends on your stack. Like if you're going to stack up Kansas City and Dallas, yeah, Travis Kelce's obviously yes, it gives him a bonus. George Kittle as a one-off I think looks good, but I prefer Darren Waller for $200 less. But if you're going to stack up that game game for San Francisco? Yes. George Kittle's is a yes. So basically, just try and get your tight end in your stack. In terms of one-off tight ends, if you have the money, Mike Gesicki projects out for over 13 fantasy points for me. Dalton Schultz in stacks. Dan Arnold looks like a top one-off. Dawson Knox in stacks. Ricky Seals-Jones, a top one-off, but he missed practice already with his hip injury. If Logan Thomas is finally off the IR, which it doesn't seem like that, so track the status of the Washington tight ends. But really, the only one-off tight ends that I'm looking to get to that aren't in stacks are probably going to be Dan Arnold, Mike Gesicki, and probably Darren Waller, depending on what happens with that Washington football team. Gerald Everett's another one just because he's so cheap. But if you're looking for punt tight ends, like Jeffrey Swaim is seeing 3 or 4 targets a week for Tennessee. That doesn't seem that exciting, but he's 2,800. Ozoma is coming off the bye at 3,500. That's okay, but that's about it. Like, you can punt to Ozoma. You can try and punt to Gerald Everett, who saw 8 targets last week. I think that was more so because of the scheme that the Packers were playing than really Gerald Everett being involved much. Like, I don't know how consistent that is, but tight end's a tough one this week. I think you build out the rest of your lineup. You find a cheap defense, and you see what you can do with tight end after that. If you have a stack where you can get a tight end in there, just put them in there for even more correlation upside. If you don't, I think I start looking, depending on your price range, as Gerald Everett as a one-off, the Washington football team starting tight end as a one-off, Gesicki, although he's a little bit more expensive, but he looks like a really strong play this week. 7 targets last week, no catches, will keep people off of him. If you're trying to find like a leverage play at the tight end position, early on right now, Dalton Schultz only 4% owned because he's somewhat expensive and that stack's expensive. Ricky Seals-Jones, because of the murkiness, only 4% owned. Gesicki, only 6% owned. Arnold is going to be single-digit owned. So, yeah, I mean, tight end, there's no standout plays. Arnold continues to score like 10 points a week. There's guys who look good there, but kind of just put it into your stack. And if you can't fit it into your stack, or you don't want to play one of those tight ends in your stack because you like the wide receivers better, the one-offs, depending on the salary tier you're in, there's some options for you. So there you go. Week 11 in somewhat of a nutshell. I appreciate you all tuning in for this one. Week 11, the final thoughts. We'll have a That One Do video finding the best leverage plays Saturday, Sunday question and answer live stream for all of you. We're going to make it a subscriber-only chat now, I believe. So if you want to get your messages in on any of the Showdown live streams, the Sunday live streams, you have to be a subscriber. And what does that mean? You just have to hit the subscribe button for free, and then you can put your questions and comments into the live chat. So hit that subscribe button. It pops up right here. I appreciate you all tuning in. Come join the community over on Patreon if you want to get in. 1,000+ members, ownership projections, rankings for GPPs and cash games, projections in general, optimizers, all this type of stuff. Different sports. NBA is going right now, going lovely. We have an NBA props tool now, so a bunch of stuff over there. Check it out. Support the sponsors of the show as well for the final plug. PrizePicks. Use that code Sally. Get a free bet up to $100. They keep the lights on, all these lights on, all the background, the shirts on the body here. They do that for us. Appreciate the lovely people over at PrizePicks. And also SuperDraft. $25 code over on SuperDraft gets you $25 right back if you use the code Sal. Sal on any of these platforms. Check it all out. We built a dummy SuperDraft lineup here. We have SuperDraft projections if you need them on Patreon. There's all the plugs for me. Appreciate you all a ton. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you when I see you, gang. I'll see you in the next one.